All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Solid Ground live stream number 25. Today is what, June 26th? And we have a special topic for you today. We decided that since it keeps coming up, we keep talking about origins and where's all this coming from, and we keep putting on our tinfoil hats, we would just go ahead and wear them today for you. And David, I really like your hat. What is this? Can you tell me a little bit about your hats, people?
Well, there's so much to talk about. It's sort of not really a top hat. It's not really a fedora. I think I had an idea when I started, and then at the end of it, I think it looks kind of looks a little like a pork pie hat you get. But I'm about the least cool version of whatever his face is from Breaking Bad. That's kind of what I was. That's a very charitable interpretation of my hat. I think is I forgot his name. What's his name from Breaking Bad?
The main guy.
The main guy. Walt. Yeah, that's
Walt. Yeah.
That's my charitable interpretation. I'm Walt from Breaking Bad, but that's really not what I am. I'm wearing a tinfoil. I think it looks a bit like a My Fair Lady tinfoil hat, doesn't it?
It
does. So yeah, but it's my first venture into tinfoil hat wearing. I think also I don't steer towards conspiracy theories much, but I really am going to try and embrace it over the next hour, and conclude most of the time that probably it's caused by sort of lizard people set hell bent on sort of taking over the world, where I can, at least. Yeah.
You're going to bring in the David Icke perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's David Icke when we need him?
Okay. So I guess, I guess we should talk about Solid Ground just a little bit. We have a couple of notes about Solid Ground. One, Jennifer's group is not going to be happening today because she has a previous engagement. So if you're in Jennifer's Monday group, that won't be happening. Thursday's group, my group, we are going to have a specific discussion. We're going to talk about the issues that have been raised a couple of times by a parent that's been part of the conversation. And those are surround the kids' school. So if you are coming to Thursday's group, think about that, and we'll have a targeted discussion. And then David, do you want to give us the intro to Solid Ground for anybody who's new?
Yep, certainly. Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice, CSJ, aka woke, and or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 per month. To find out how to join our community, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note, Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
Good thing, since we're wearing these.
Do you not take any advice from these ridiculous tinfoil hat wearing people?
Roan Wood in the comments says, nice touch, sorry, but they're most likely aluminum. I will go ahead and confess that mine is aluminum.
I don't think we have any tinfoil anymore, do you? Yeah.
Not that I know of. Jennifer, what inspires your headgear there?
I was feeling a little 1920s. And then this is a listening device so that I may monitor the woke and their nefarious activities, but it is disguised as very fashionable flower.
It's beautiful. It is very fashionable.
Yeah.
Deborah, how about you? What's going on there?
But it was too small for my head.
Okay.
So I went with tinfoil classic. Always good to go with the old standard.
Well, it looks very kooky. So so
what about you, Leslie? Can you tell us a bit about your hat?
Oh, this is a one of my kids' baseball caps, and it seemed like just the right thing. Lack of creativity and a lot of aluminum foil. So I I have tended to sort of steer the topic away from the larger conspiracies. Conspiracy theory is such a slur, for one thing, because it's just this way to mock people for trying to understand the machinations of powerful people who want to engineer society in a certain way. And I think that it's, to me, to my way of thinking, it's irrefutable that if that there are a powerful lobby of people who have ideas about how society should be formed. If I were very wealthy and very powerful, I know I would have the same. I think it's just a human nature sort of thing. We have ideas about how things should be done and how things shouldn't be done. And at every level, people are scoping out the world and having opinions about it. And so if you are a wealthy, powerful person, it just makes sense that some subset of those people are going to exert their influence in a certain way over the rest of the people. And so conspiracy theory seems like a term to me that's just used to mock and slur anybody who tries to imagine what's going on. And also at the same time, there's so much conjecture because we don't really often know all of the ins and outs, and it's easy to be sort of to jump to conclusions when you have little bits of data. And so there is something mock-worthy sometimes in some of the theories people come up with. So it's just this big messy field. And I've tended to steer away from it just because it makes more sense to me to describe what we're actually experiencing rather than to go into a bunch of speculation. But that said, there is reason for the speculation as well. And anyway, so that's my foundation for why I haven't really delved into that a whole lot in conversations that I've been having on this channel. But what do you guys think?
I think that there really is basically a cultural revolution going on, and we are all trying to make sense of it. And there's also a sense of being sort of unmoored from what we've grown up with and what makes sense. And so it makes us all feel a bit crazy. And so we're struggling to interpret what's happening. And it comes up in groups all the time. Well, who's doing this? Why? What are the motivations? What's behind this? Who's behind this? And I think it does make sense because we're meaning-making people and we're trying to make sense of the changes in our world. And sometimes we're probably a bit off course in how we're making sense of it. And other times I think we're closer to the truth. But I think it's normal that we're trying to figure it out.
I really think as time's gone on as well, we've seen previous ideas that were considered conspiracy theories turn into actual really credible explanations for things that have occurred. I mean, obviously COVID and the fact that not long after the COVID outbreak really started stretching across the world, people were saying maybe it wasn't from the wet markets, maybe it was from one of the COVID labs, and it one of the COVID labs that operates within Wuhan, perhaps, maybe coincidentally. And yet people were considered conspiracy theorists for even saying that stuff. And then as evidence comes out, you start to realize that anyone who sort of has an opinion outside of the mainstream can get quite easily called a conspiracy theorist. So, I mean, what you've been saying as well about the fact that we are trying to consider just how much some, great elite group of people's opinions can trickle down on the rest of the world. I'm assuming that people who operate within that space would quite happily level a charge of conspiracy theory or conspiracy nut at anyone who maybe even starts to I don't know, get a bit warm with their thoughts or with their hypotheses. Maybe that's even something that does happen. Do people get called conspiracy theorists now when they get close to uncovering the truth? That only feels like something that would serve to further encourage people to consider those things. It's a bit like censorship, isn't it? The more you try and push things down, the more they crop up because people want to resist that. So yeah, I don't know how many. I mean, I'd be interested in knowing the kind of conspiracy theory temperature in our virtual room and see if people here have some particularly interesting kind of conspiracy theories, or maybe even we could sort of say, is anyone here that doesn't believe the moon landings happened, or 9/11 was an inside job? I don't know if we're going to go into that sort of detail today, but I'd be interested. I'm curious, but I don't even know if my curiosity should take us there necessarily, but yeah.
Well, those are good questions, and maybe we should answer them. But what do you think, Deborah? What are your thoughts?
10 different things all at once. I've tended to not go in the direction of assuming there's some, entities, partly because I feel like people aren't necessarily so coordinated. It's a little bit hard to get things done anyway. And so many things seem to be multiple forces kind of coming together at certain times. But at the same time, especially with, say, something like the World Economic Forum, like a group of people who are powerful, outright making statements that are about controlling things, or who was it? I don't know, it was Larry Fink. Someone said the other day, like on a stage in an interview, yes, we are going to force people to do such, like this said, we are going to force people. So there are some activities that are happening that are, definitely concerning, done by powerful people. I think where I get caught in it sometimes too is just sometimes it feels like there's a lot of psychological projection. Like it's very easy to make a they, like the amorphous they that are doing something. And so I know I have an allergy, like a little knee-jerk reaction to that. And at the same time, I mean, I'm willing to entertain things that might not be, consensus opinions. The other thing I'm just thinking, what's interesting at this point in time is because of social media, because the legacy media or things they're becoming less and less trusted, and trying to figure out what is a correct narrative. I mean, we used to have like the narrative, like the three networks or whatever, and then like just the crazy people, right? But now the narrative's kind of breaking down, and like maybe, there's a lot more room for hypothesizing, even though people try to shut it up. I don't know. We're at a moment where there's probably a lot more froth, like just a lot more. I think it's maybe how QAnon kind of came on and had some legs because people just aren't trusting what used to be the ways they get their information. And you're like, well, and I guess, I'm going to go look somewhere else and try to find community that way. So I don't know. That was multiple things.
I try to stay curious about people's opinions around these things and not get judgmental about things that I don't actually know for myself. If my belief is informed by authority telling me, then that's not a firsthand belief. That's received information. And so I try to stay humble enough to have at least the curiosity about why another person believes what they do, and not just dismiss it. For instance, and this is something that a lot of people will laugh at. I actually have a good friend who believes in flat Earth, and I don't believe in that. But I'm like, have I ever zoomed out to space and looked back at a ball? I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's a ball to me, but I'm just like, I know that sounds funny. We're all that's kind of like this area where people are supposed to laugh about it, but I'm not going to be, I'll just say, why do you think that? And then listen, and I'm not mocking my friend. I'm not thinking this is ridiculous. I don't know. Like, do I have a belief in one direction? Pretty much. But I just don't want to dismiss people out of hand based on received information that I've gathered from institutions that have proven themselves to be not necessarily trustworthy. And so I don't know what to do with that. But I guess the biggest conspiracy theory area for me that I've tended to be associated with or believe in is the danger of the vaccine schedule, the childhood vaccine schedule. My oldest child was injured by a shot that she received when she was 11, and it changed her life. And I started doing a lot of research about, and I read everything I could get my hands on for about 10 years before coming to the conclusion that I don't really trust the schedule as it's laid out. And I would, my takeaway is for every time you think about vaccinating for a given illness, research the drug like you would research any drug you would take. Think of it like a drug. Don't just accept that these are just safe and effective the way that they tell you. And so, you know, there might be times when you would choose to go ahead and do one, but don't just receive that schedule as I must follow the schedule that the government has given to my doctor to give to me. So I know that's a topic I could dive into really deeply, but I'll just stay on the surface of it unless people want to.
That's interesting, Lizzie. I was just wondering, do you think around vaccines, the fact that there was such widespread, I mean, I don't know if this includes you, but like there was so much widespread coverage of people who were, say, anti-vax because of the now found out to be kind of false link between autism and vaccines. Because of that, there was such a large amount of like attention paid towards that, and such a kind of like a push to dumb that down. That in a way, we've lost a bit of nuance around vaccines as a result. So we can't have conversations about the side effects of vaccines, because any form of anti-vax sometimes makes you somehow part of this kooky club of people that believe that you're going to get autism. It's like there's so many other layers and colors to that we don't explore. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would say that it's like that it's a false link. I wouldn't go that far. I'd look more into that, because there are some mechanisms by which it seems that there's some combination of factors that can lead to the development of neurological damage. And I don't think that it's been proven that that immune assaults, including vaccination, can't have a role to play in that. So I think that there's more research to be done on that. But yes, I do think, well, I'm a big believer in the banality of evil. And I think that a lot of what's going on with that seems to me, and again, this just dives into speculation, but it seems to me that it's more about a payday for companies that are making a lot of money off of having a captive market, a captive consumer market for their products, than some larger scale social engineering project. Although, you know, I don't know. I tend to look first at Occam's razor and what's the simplest answer here. And the simplest answer is that these things cost a lot of money and they are a huge money maker. There's manufacturers are completely immune to product liability for anything that's put on the childhood vaccine schedule. So if you get injured by them, you can't sue. And so it's a great moneymaker. And plus they're heavily subsidized by governments. But again, that's a big topic that could really irritate a lot of people to talk about. But
it really it feels like the environment, it really lends itself, if you've got kind of like questions over bodily autonomy, powerful vested interests in pushing a certain narrative, and then any shutting down of exploration. So I'm assuming what you're saying then, Leslie, is the fact that there's still a push to not explore vaccines, or there's inconclusive evidence, or there's still questions that haven't been answered sufficiently, particularly for yourself then.
Well, we're messing with really complex systems when we start messing with the human body. And I think that people can get really myopic when it comes to the research that they do on specific, specific things and interactions. And one thing that there have been some researchers who have shown that there are long-term non-specific effects from some of these drugs. And you're not studying how they interact. I'm not the best person to talk about this, for one thing. I know we've jumped into one quite specific, the most articulate.
Sorry, I'm just curious. Okay. So I've started asking questions, but I appreciate you're not necessarily a medical expert on it.
No, I'm totally not. I'm just my takeaway again, and there's a siren in the background appropriately right now that we're talking about medical stuff. But my takeaway is just that we need to think for ourselves and consult the resources the best that we have available to ourselves, instead of just always receiving instructions and following instructions blindly. And if I had done more research on the particular vaccine that injured my daughter, I probably wouldn't have given it to her, for instance, because it's got really poor efficacy. And anyway, so
Yeah.
mhm,
Makes sense.
yeah, I probably wouldn't
You know,
have
it's
given
just-
it to her.
So sort of the shame in this is that because I'm a person who until recently would have been not totally give away the authority of the institutions, but actually value institutions as like you would hope they were places where wisdom was being accumulated so that everybody, if everybody has to go do their own research on every single topic all the time, like how do we, do anything, right? We've got to have our lives. And so to have a place where there's an aggregation or a focus on a particular area. And so I'm hoping, I don't know, at some point we actually could have institutions we trust and have some things that we don't have to check out everything on our own because it's so, aside from inefficient, I think there's a right place for them. They just have not been being proven to be trustworthy. And I don't know what it is where, I guess it's all of the things, whether it's critical social justice, like what has led to almost all of them. Ideologically, a lot of them are falling, but it also feels like they somehow hit their limits on other things, whether it's financial incentives, whether it's like other things that have made them all kind of, I don't want to say grind to a halt, but just the whole thing to just kind of rot or something like that. And I don't know why it's all kind of happening at once, because you even look at our infrastructure. There's so many things that are just kind of like not working and the wheels are falling off and on so many levels. I guess I could have a conspiracy theory about that, but I guess I was making a plug for I'd love to have institutions that do work someday that we could trust.
I want to ask you, Deborah, what do you think? Because when you say that, one of the things that comes to my mind is at the point where you have to trust institutions to get information about how to function in the world. Have you complicated your life beyond what makes sense for your life? Are you going beyond? What do you need from those institutions in order to function in your life?
Well, say they're doing research. Say they're like, you're not going to go and do your own lab experience, right? To like check the vaccines.
But for what? Like what aspect of life is so complex that we need that kind of level of?
I think there's so many places where there's knowledge. I don't see it as, it's interesting. It doesn't feel like, generally it hasn't felt like authority to me. It's felt like wisdom is being gotten, people are doing analyses, people are doing a lot of digestion of material that I don't have time to do. People are sitting thinking deeply about things that I actually don't even have the capacity to potentially think about. So to me, it's even like knowledge bases, like places, sometimes people put all the information in one place. So you just have something somewhere. So I don't know. I personally, again, I guess I am a person who does value institutions when they're healthy, when they are, even if it's a church or it's like something where there's people are coming together and doing a group effort that somehow they might be able to do it better than your average person could do it. And it frees everybody else up to have their life and do the things that they're interested in and they're good at. But this means you have to trust them or they have to be trustworthy.
So you're talking about the center of knowledge transmission and authority as in authorship and as in having some connection to the source of the information.
Well, and assuming that they actually do know something and they actually have something good to offer, right? Like I'm presuming a place where there's actually intelligent people who are wise and maybe they have, I don't know, they trained in something where they actually know how to do things I don't know how to do. And I'm not going to go try to learn how to, or maybe I can't even, like my brain's not going to do that. So, but it's funny. I think I don't go up to them like, oh, you authority, but I might go, oh, okay. That person's smart. I think say with a friend, would you go to a friend, if you had two friends to decide about something, some topic you don't know much about, and say one of them seems to know more and seems like, which one would you go to? Right. So if they spent 10 years looking into such and such, and you knew they weren't motivated by some other, I don't know, weird reason to set you off track, or someone's handing them some money under the table or something like that. So I don't know. We get it out of the realm of title, and because I know people are bumping into this, like, so what if someone has a title or they're an expert or all that? But I feel like there actually could be people who actually are more expert than me in something that I'd probably want their input on something, And but again, this trust piece is what I think is the problem.
And what you're describing there is the difference between like going to a friend or an elder or somebody that you know and you have reason to trust and believe for advice or for resources versus trusting
Kind of
some
top down.
company. Yeah. And then it seems like human nature gets involved there, and we have all kinds of conflicts of interest that could make a large institution untrustworthy. Maybe it's not, but maybe it's just that we want to naively believe that it wouldn't be, because maybe it ends up being somewhat motivated by things that are not directly for our benefit, but rather for some other larger purpose, which could be the collective benefit. I mean, sometimes the collective good is going to be very different from the good of the individual. And that doesn't mean that somebody has they're like this marionette strings, it could just be, it depends on what you're shooting for. If something's going to be good on in aggregate, is it necessarily going to be the best thing for that individual in their life? And so just understanding perspective might have something to do with trusting institutions.
Well, it seems like checks and balances too built in, and this is where like democracy comes in too. Like, at what level should the people be deciding even what the checks and balances are and making sure they're done? Anyway, I've been talking a lot.
No, that's interesting. What do you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, I really understand from Deborah's perspective what she's saying. I would love to trust institutions. There are a whole slew of topics that I have absolutely no interest in, and I really would like somebody who is interested in it to tell me what to do. And if I'm interested, then I love reading about something, and I'll read in depth. But there's many topics where I'm not interested, but now I'm really skeptical of all institutions and what their motivations are. And that's kind of a sense of, it's a little bit of a loss of innocence for me, and makes me feel more vulnerable, because I feel like I think I grew up thinking there are these people who are sort of looking out for us. And now I'm thinking there's fewer of those than I thought. And I mean, if you just look at what people have been told in this country about what we should eat, for example, we have really, really been misinformed about that. And the sugar industry had paid scientists back in the 60s to point the blame at fat, including healthy fats, for disease, particularly cardiovascular disease, and to not look at sugar. So in other words, it's dangerous to eat an avocado, but you can pig out on Tootsie Rolls because they have no fat.
No fat.
We've been given so much misinformation in the food pyramid, where they said you should mainly eat grains, which we now know is not true. And so it's, I'm a person who's an independent thinker, but I don't want to have to try to become an expert on everything. Some things are outside my capability. I would need a neurosurgeon, obviously, if I had brain cancer. But yeah, I would really like institutions to be trustworthy and to not become corrupt. But I do think that all organizations, especially as they grow larger, their mission slides away from what their original intention was into maintaining the organization itself and the survival of the organization. And that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. David, what do you think?
I think that's well said. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about sort of climate science and thinking, gosh, I wish I could trust what we hear about that. And I want that to be as a collective idea, making sure what we're doing isn't damaging the world, and making sure that we've got enough of a world for generations to come. That's surely something where we kind of go, right, we need to look beyond our own individual scope. But that's become corrupted as well. And I find there's so many contradictions or different opinions, or the politics gets in the way, or all sorts. And then I just sort of think, oh God, I almost don't don't want to read up about it because I find it exhausting to be sort of optimistic or pessimistic and then find out that I'm wrong. It's kind of just exhausting. But yeah, it should be something that I think probably we all feel something for, which is wanting to help the planet, but at the same time, yeah, feeling conned, feeling duped by powerful people is more and more something we feel these days. So yeah, it's trying to weigh those things up, and yeah, I find that difficult.
It's interesting what that ties into what Deborah was saying about how it feels like sort of a confluence of all these things cracking open at the same time, where we're having this. Is it just a domino effect of realizing that you've been misled on one thing that's important that makes you start uncovering lots of stones and saying, what else is suspect in our foundational understanding of our culture?
Yeah. Do you sometimes wonder if, I mean, it's to some degree there is an amount of science getting it wrong, and and then scientists and researchers being humble and going, we got it wrong. Turns out there's this whole thing over here. Like the fat thing could have been a case of we got it wrong. It became a zeitgeisty thing to kind of like put more and more money into researching fat because we found a few things that kind of like tied together to suggest that maybe it was fat. But that would be an honest, kind of humble approach to it that said, oh, we missed out a load of stuff on sugar that we weren't really looking at, which maybe there were investments made into fat and corporations and all this stuff, and advertisement went into that kind of made that the bus just take on a whole new speed in that direction. But it's just like, that's not what's happening. And like you say, Jen, it was actually corporations paying off researchers. So that corruption happened, and then God knows how much of an effect that's had. So I'm just thinking like there's got to be a humble amount of like humble being a scientist and going, we don't know everything. We've got so many more stones to turn over. But yeah, that's a very different thing. And there's so many interested parties these days in pushing narratives that it's hard to know what that is.
You know, it also seems like there's so many, I don't want to call them incentives. I just see, at least on Twitter, like science Twitter, right? Like less humility. It's like these scientists are all kind of punching at each other and then kind of ad hominem, and like people, like they're lost this sort of scientific spirit of, research. And so you find something out and it's wrong. And so, okay, now you do a new experiment. There's something about this cult of personality that even not all scientists, there's probably some quiet ones back somewhere doing their research, and are willing to change course if your hypothesis doesn't work out. But I don't think the social media space is good for our getting to truth in some ways it is maybe someone revealing something new, but I think it's involving people's personalities in a certain way and their turf and then their politics. Like, these are all not putting things in the direction we'd like to see them go.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple of super chats. You guys want to read them? Let's see.
Yes, please.
A. Asante says, how open should one be to ideas no matter what they are? And maybe that's in response to my saying that my flat earth friend, that I don't dismiss that out of hand, I listen. What do you guys think about how open one should be to ideas no matter what they are?
I like to listen and try to understand where someone's coming from, because even if I don't draw the same conclusions as that person, I might learn something. And, at worst case scenario, I'm at least understanding them better. I think it's good to be able to have the mental capacity to entertain ideas, but not adopt them wholesale. Like, just because you're thinking something and exploring something doesn't mean you have to say, oh, okay, sign me up. But sure, I'll listen to somebody.
Kind of can get you to have to look at what are your priors too. Like, I know someone who so brilliant in so many things, and she's very religious and happens to believe, what is it called, the young earth? I mean, it's like the world was created and however many thousand, like 6,000 years, I don't know, something like that. And it was like, actually for me, it was like a Zen koan or a blow my mind open, because I was like, this is so interesting that this person who was using Bayesian probability, like all these things. And then that went with it. I was like, this is so interesting. And it's like, I mean, I can go to a place of, we don't know what the hell is really going on here, right? I can go to that. We can go, we're doing science and we think we do this and we throw the ball and it lands where we think, and like, we think we know how that works and we think we know evolution. And I do have some place where it's like, maybe we don't really even know at all, like at all, and we can kind of manage, so I'll listen. It didn't, that didn't make me suddenly go, yeah, I think it's, only 6,000 years. Like I didn't shift on that, but it maybe made me just remember that we could at some point like discover another way we're looking at all of these things than we happen to be now. Even though I'm still probably going to operate on the frame I have, but I'm aware I have a frame.
I've started to get quite cynical about, I think is it Jung who has that saying that people don't have ideas, but ideas have people. And just the idea that I was even having conversations with friends this weekend. I went to a friend's wedding, and there were conversations that were had that were around around the trans debate. I know we're going out slightly off conspiracies, but a couple of people have maybe agreed on the idea that all of this furore about pride and trans and ideology was all something started by right-wing people to pit people against each other so that they can. That in itself sounded like a conspiracy theory, but because my left-wing friends had concluded that it's right-wing people that have set this up, people they don't like, set this up to cause infighting between different groups, between vulnerable groups and between people who are scared for women's rights and all these sorts of things, that somehow the person controlling it was someone that they all agreed they didn't like. They all just kind of went, yeah, that's probably it. And I was just like, oh, wow. Oh, humanity.
It was just easily accepted.
Yeah, it was easily accepted. And it's just, and I guess it's about what Deborah said about understanding your own priors, to be honest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think it's really the way that the original posted question is worded is really open and vague. And so if I try to insert different things into that equation, there's some ideas that I think I wouldn't be very open to, like ideas around hurting people. I child abuse, pedophilia. I know I have some places where I wouldn't be open to some ideas. There would be some things that would be like, nope. And I also have some of my own really personal, I guess, values. I'd say I tend to be pretty libertarian in a lot of ways, but then there's a few areas where I really have strong opinions. And one of them is around the commodification of sex. So like the porn industry and sex for sale and stuff. So I tend to have like my own, this is just me personally, my own areas where I know I have rigidity and firm opinions, and I'm not as open. But for ideas that I haven't done a lot of research on, I try to remain somewhat flexible, at least in, as Jennifer said, listening to another person and trying to understand their process and having respect for their own process in that, and having enough openness to and enough humility to know when something is not, I'm not an expert on it and I don't really know what the truth around a certain matter is. And I think so many areas of life, like these big picture sort of things, like you're talking about, David, like did the right-wing people manufacture this and like, how could we know? And so if somebody has an idea about that, or how could I know? I guess I should say, how could I know? I don't know if that's the truth or not. So does it hurt me to be open to that and say, well, tell me more about that? And then I don't necessarily, like Jennifer said, I don't have to adopt that idea to be respectful and open to the fact that somebody else believes it. So yeah, I think that's
sorry. Sometimes it just helps you confirm your own values even more. Like I watched something, I can't remember what it was, some kind of documentary about basically people who do who create porn content for online audiences. And I watched this documentary, and they were very much in favor of it, and explaining why, in their view, the industry was a good thing and must not be interfered.
Oh, wow.
I do laugh when I think of it. I mean, but it really just, I listened to all of this. I didn't expect to change my mind, but I listened to their points of view. I certainly do see how it's convenient for people to be able to post that content from home. And I'm sympathetic to people who wish to work from home. However, I'm still I very strongly agree with you about the harms of the commodification of sex. And we're also seeing, as therapists, a real rise in people becoming addicted to porn and all of the attendant problems that causes in their relationships, sometimes even getting into illegal activity and criminal consequences. So, but it's interesting to listen to a defense of something that I think is a really harmful thing.
Yeah, I think that is really an interesting thing, because it helps you to understand the arguments against your own position, and you can either become more accommodating and flexible towards those arguments, or you can find that it actually solidifies your own position, as you say. So that's good that you were able to sit through that. I think I would struggle a bit with that one, and I'm just recognizing an area of rigidity in myself. I have a real, and so that's also interesting, because that kind of leads into, and there's one more super chat, and it's about maybe this will be a good segue, one more, because it's a little bit of a bigger question, but it segues into the gender issue, which I think is tied in, and maybe this is more of a linking and bigger picture conspiracy sort of way to discuss this. But I think that there's something between the gender issue that we're seeing with the gender confusion in kids, the commodification of sex, and the destruction of sexual morality in our culture. And I okay, so I could go bigger with that, but I'll just read this thing and then we can talk about it. So Fander Zelig says, old friends, a gay couple, and their they/them child visited. When corrected on pronouns, I said, I want to honor not using he, but will try to simply use the kid's name. My wife and the couple are upset with this. Advice. So looking for advice on how to handle that, I guess.
My advice is don't violate your own conscience. If you feel like it is wrong, for whatever reason, if you feel like, well, I'm contributing towards the transition of a child, possibly helping to kind of guide them along a pathway to medicalization or surgical procedures, and that's your moral objection, I wouldn't cross that line. If you feel like it is just a complete shredding of reality, to use a plural for one person, and it makes you feel slightly crazy, I wouldn't do it for that reason either. I think that's enough, because then you are speaking something that you believe to be a lie. And I think that makes us shrivel inside and become smaller. And you can't restrict that. If you're shriveling in one area of your life, you will shrivel in other areas too. You'll shrivel in your creativity, in your relationships, maybe in your career, maybe physically. It's very hard to compartmentalize dishonesty and shriveling from what you know to be the truth. So I would stick to your guns, and if people are pissed off about it, let them be pissed. You'll be pissed and resentful if you're doing something that you know to be wrong.
I think that's great. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Sorry, I think that's great as well, Jen. I was going to say, I just think that, like, if you're agreeing to pronouns, well, I guess if you understand why you don't want to affirm someone's pronouns, that's one thing. But kind of just going along with pronouns and not necessarily knowing what you're kind of sort of tacitly, implicitly going along with. Are you going along with that child's innocent self-discovery, or are you actually going along with something that is slightly more coercive? Is it something that they've read from school, or have been told from school, they've been encouraged at school? Is it something that they're, very far left parents have decided to sort of push upon them in some way? And it's not something you'll necessarily know, but by kind of going along with it, it might give you a sense of feeling uncomfortable. It's kind of like what Jen was saying. Don't do something that violates you. If you've got a sense in which you don't know what you'd be tacitly going along with by using those pronouns, then I wouldn't. And I guess the advice then probably is about like how to go about having that conversation. Really, that's a tough one, but yeah, we need to trust our guts more, I think.
I heard just very recently a child and adolescent psychologist say that social transition is very much a therapeutic intervention. It is an intervention. And so by abstaining from participating in that intervention, I think I think it is a really, I think it's an important decision to decide if you're going to participate or not in that. And that this person's, the person who posted that question, is trying to create a compromise solution where he's just going to use the child's name instead. That seems like the most respectful way to remain polite, not participate in the intervention, but also maintain a neutral stance with regard to the intervention. And for other people to be pushing, for his wife and this couple to be upset that he's refusing to use these specific words, even though he's not using the words that they're asking him not to use. I think that is the social error is on their part, not on his.
Yeah.
He's trying to remain polite and neutral. They're crossing the line with trying to compel him to use words that he's not comfortable using. And so that I like what you said, Jennifer, you're pissing them off this way, but you'd be pissing yourself off the other way. And it's better to be in alignment with your own values on this. And if you feel strongly that you don't want to participate in that, I really think that's something you should listen to. Deborah, do you want to weigh in?
No, everybody said such amazingly great things. I can't add.
Okay, well, I hope that was helpful discussion for that question. There's a couple more. Asante, who asked us that first question about open-mindedness, says, do not be so open-minded that your brain falls out, GK Chesterton. So yeah, that's good. That's great. And then also same poster, thank you, Asante, says, if sex work is wrong, then could sex outside of the context of monogamy, I think this is just a typo here, but then sex outside of the context of monogamy is wrong, because sex outside of monogamy can lead to broken homes, heartbreak, and disease. That's phrased as a question. I don't know. I think that's a big topic. It's interesting. I think that my thought on that is that merits a longer exploration than, maybe an entire live stream. We could talk about sexual morality and have that discussion, and might find that we have a variety of different opinions on different aspects of it. But what do you guys think? We should maybe take that up another time and really dig into it more deeply? Or do you have any thoughts immediately on the question?
I think it's a topic for later. And I will also say that I don't hold much hope for the future of relationships that are non-monogamous and all this, what is it called? Ethical non-monogamy and all. It's all just horny people wanting to have it off and want to have their cake and eating it too. You can wrap it up in any philosophy you want. It's just, I want to fuck who I want to fuck, and I'm trying to do it without consequences. And good luck. Good luck to you.
Is it a lot of the time these ideas or frameworks sound good, don't they? But if it's one thing that they can never seem to do is to have an inbuilt sort of self-righting mechanism that means that narcissistic people who've not managed to recognize their own narcissistic temperament can't take advantage of it, because no one ever builds that sort of like self-righting mechanism into these frameworks, and so therefore they just run amok, don't they?
What do you think about that, Jennifer? I'd like to hear your response to what David said.
I don't quite understand it. So
Oh, right. Okay.
phrase it briefly.
No, I just mean like a lot of what we're seeing in woke theology, if you like. It doesn't have. It sounds good. It sounds compassionate, but it doesn't have enough. It's not solid enough to kind of protect people against narcissistic people saying the right words. Do it, like polygamous people can sort of say, well, I'm in love with this person, I'm also in love with this person, why do I have to just share my love in one direction? I've got so much love to give. And it sounds a lot of the time like it's people who don't necessarily know that their own selfish desires are possibly motivated. Like you said, Jen, horny people who just want to fuck.
No, thank you for explaining that, Mark. No, I absolutely, I think that it's right. It's really right for exploitation. And I'm not talking about young people who are just, in the process of dating and they're, playing the field. It's a life phase, can be an appropriate life phase. I'm talking about like what you're saying, like people who are like, oh, I'm married, but it's an open marriage, and here's the long list of intellectual reasons why this is going to work.
It's very intellectual, yeah, exactly.
And and there's all these justifications, and in fact, we're quite a bit higher morally than the rest of you, because the rest of you just have your petty jealousies and
You're involved.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's much higher to be controlled by one's genitalia, certainly. So. Yeah, I have a dim view of that, let's just say.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like a very antinatalist kind of, it goes along with this really antinatalist movement that we're having across the board. We've got no matter where you fall on it, the way that they're doing abortion now is pretty extreme. The conversations happening around abortion, and like abortion all the way up till the time of birth, is a thing that people are like happy to promote. What the heck is that? And there's just this like casual sterilization of children. Like, we're not supposed to have really this. You're wrecking kids' sexual function through a lot of these gender interventions, and then the rise in polyamory, ethical non-monogamy kind of stuff, which is all about making sex into something that's purely recreational. The promotion of porn, it's becoming so like, you talk about porn and what you get back is like this idea that it's inevitable and that it's a must and that it's totally fine. And how dare you even say that it's not okay for people to be like having their favorite porn, that they talk about. Like it's all so different. It seems like it's risen all together, and it's part of this. What is sex becoming, and who benefits from this, and what is our social net benefit from that happening? And it seems like, well, since we have our hats on, from a population control standpoint, it's brilliant. Get people to stop having babies and think about sex differently.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring it back to the hats. The tinfoil hat thing too much?
I was just thinking I haven't done enough linking things back. I said that I'd embrace tinfoil hat framing, and I haven't. I've not done enough. Where are all the lizard people now? Yeah.
What do the lizard people think about population control, David?
Yeah, well, they're lizards, so they're not a big fan of the old Homo sapiens. We spent too long thinking we're top of the world when we're not. And I think the lizard people are going to start letting their masks fall off because, you know, they want to be found out because they're jealous of not having the spotlight. Yeah. Okay, that'll do.
Is that the royal family? Because I've heard the David Icke thing.
Oh, that's a good one.
That is what he talks about. He thinks that the royal family are basically lizard people. And then, yeah, isn't there like photographs of some of the royal family in sort of like strange, you know, you take a picture of someone mid drink or something and the still makes it they look a little bit reptilian. And then you read, I mean, David Icke will probably write, or one of his followers would write a whole web page on how this is, you know, the lizard man finally sort of taking his mask off. I don't know. I don't know too much about it, but it's something like that.
Are the royals lizards, Jennifer?
No, but Harry and Meghan, they might be. There's something.
What do you think, Deborah?
It's making me think more about that was the other, you know, it's funny, you've got the lizard. Well, I don't know how the lizards relate to Illuminati. I mean, that was always the one that was really interesting, of like this ongoing elite. And then I don't even know if there's the Masons and there's a while I was trying to understand these esoteric lines and back to Christ and Mary, like all this stuff. It is so interesting about people. I'm thinking about this right now. And again, that desire for, I mean, our appeal to myth or origin story, or that's the part of the desire to put these pieces together, aside from just wanting to make sense of things. Like there's like a beautiful aspect of human beings that loves the myth or loves the legend or loves something like that, and would spend time trying to seek that out. And especially if there are mystical like elements or some sort of people had gotten powers or something like that. It's like, or people were cultivating evil powers. Like that's just very captivating. I'm having a bit of like kind of compassion for the desire for, especially if we're going back and like doing way historical conspiracy theories or whatever, that there's like kind of a longing to maybe have those things be true.
To make things make sense in a narrative arc.
There's the sense, and then there's what's it? I don't know what you would call it. I'm just thinking of not Jordan Peterson would talk, but there's an emotional. There's just like an emotional. It's not even like I know and I understand, but I feel connected, or it feels magical, or it feels. Just imagine, like, you know, whether it's Harry Potter, or Lord of the Rings, or old myths or something like that. And I don't know. For me, it kind of something wells up inside. That's I can imagine people with swords and things like that's kind of uplifting in a certain sense. Or if you even the stories where there's like some evil, you know, creatures and they put everybody in a cauldron. Like I don't know what. Like something just really is like soul captivating or something.
Yeah.
About that.
I was also thinking, as you were talking, Deborah, like there were these AI generated images of kind of like, I don't know, like getting an AI to generate an image of a 19-year-old sort of like birthday party at a club or something, and they were all they weren't humans, but they were AI generated. So and there was I think it was like a post on Reddit, and they were like, can you see this picture? What do people think when they see this? And there was a feeling, and I think it was all shared by the commenters, that they were looking at these images, something didn't quite feel right about them. They looked a bit kind of uncanny valley, sort of weird. And then under the comments, someone revealed that's because this person here has more fingers than they should do, and they've got a hand, and then this person here has more teeth than is humanly possible. And then you're kind of like, oh, I knew I had a gut feel as to that they didn't quite feel right. There's something really disjointed, maybe even a little bit alien about them. And I don't know, I was just thinking as you were talking, Deborah, about maybe our obsession with celebrity, or maybe even the fact that like maybe we're not designed to look at kind of really famous people constantly putting on a show for, you know, being scrutinized with a camera lens 24/7. And so when we look at them, we start to get a detachment from them, and we think they're not really real people anymore, and we can treat them differently, or maybe it's even I don't know, like self-defense mechanism to mean that we can treat them differently by making them inhuman. Yeah, I don't know, I was just thinking out loud.
That's really interesting. And yeah, it does seem like there's some kind of weird objectification that necessarily goes on when you are observing people that closely. When you're, I remember well, I guess it would have been like the 90s and the 2000s, like right before the reality TV thing really became so popular. And it seems like it's just continued. But when I was a kid, I was a teenager in the 90s, and it was all the thing to like look at People magazine, and the supermodels became really popular, and people were reading about the stars' lives behind the scenes and stuff. That was just such a thing. And there was something really gross about it to me, something really, really disturbing about it. And I can remember when reality TV just first kind of started was when I got rid of my TV, and I just didn't want to have a television in the house. It just made me feel so gross, this obsession with celebrity and turning average people into celebrities that you'd want to, just understand. Why are you sitting down looking at a screen watching somebody else's life that could be just like your own life? You could go live that. You could go do that yourself, but it's more fun to just sit and consume it as if it were a product. I don't know that, but that's getting off base from what Deb was talking about, which is like that mystical, that like ethereal draw to something, I don't know, magical, like you said. And I think about, like, I've had this thought, our world that we live in is absolutely a world of magic and wonder. Absolutely. If we open our eyes today with no prior perspective, it's just that we're used to it. That's the only reason it doesn't seem magical to us. I mean, we've got, like, trees are so cool, right? Like they're these things that start at the ground and they go whoop, and then they have this green, and that's really cool. And people talk on people put a little tiny thing in their ear and hear a voice from across the entire world. Like, that's really magical. And people zoom around in, metal boxes that they get into, and they can go from one place to another place really quickly. It's so cool. If we didn't have the being doled to it by how common it is to us, it would seem magical to us. So I don't know if that thirst for magic is just a sense of how desensitized we've become to wonder in our own lives. I don't know. Did I go completely off base there, or did that make sense to anybody else?
That makes go ahead. I had a completely different thought.
I was wondering if that in any way ties into that loss of wonder and the appreciation of the sort of bliss of the ordinary, if that ties into consumption of some of these ideologies, because they're all so extreme, and it's almost like, are we trying to stimulate ourselves with ideology? Are we trying to be, get some kind of rush from online porn? Are we even getting a rush from, labeling people white supremacists and assuming these terrible things about the United States? And maybe that's really exciting, because then you get to be on the forefront of this basically sort of like a fraudulent civil rights struggle. And maybe the trans thing, I mean, what's more extreme than saying, oh, I'm just going to switch sexes, which to be 100% clear, I do not believe to be possible. But just the idea of that and pursuing that, it's like almost like this, sort of godlike level of control.
Yeah, it's like everything, all stimulation on, is on like high def.
Yeah.
It's like, instead of eating, I don't know, an apple, you got to eat a Snickers or something. And then pornography is the version of sexuality that's that kind of junk food for the sexuality. And then you're talking about these ideologies having a sort of mental impact that's similar to that, like all the extremes of everything. It's like we're needing more and more. We're trying to to blast ourselves with sensation in a way.
Another sort of piece, I mean, somewhat stimulation, and some of it I find kind of endearing actually, is this rise of even collective trying to figure things out. I think this started with, we said thinking about TV shows. I'm thinking like, say when Lost came on and everyone was trying to figure out like what's going on. And then there's these message boards and what do we think's happening? And it started to be, and maybe people were always way back in the Usenet days, conspiracy theorists, people were having little boards and talking to each other, but it seems like there's this community building, this we're kind of maybe in on it, and puzzle solving. I'm thinking with Q and on, even though I didn't really follow them that much, but I think it's a little entertaining, but people also feel like they're like on a mission to solve the thing. And so there's something, I like the part of it that's people together being excited to solve something, or to puzzle through, and maybe we got the next piece, and the collective piece of it that we're able to do because of the internet. So I think that's like another facet of how this, conspiracy theory thing sort of manifests.
Like it's speaking to some part of us that wants to have a united mission.
Yeah, be on a little team, and like we're like, did you think of this? And I found this little, did you see the Easter egg and the episode where, and so on whatever your conspiracy thing is, well, I saw this photo that had this little thing in the corner. I think that means, you know what I mean? And I think people like, I almost want to like, can we give people puzzles to solve that, are potentially ones that we could do something about, or, you know what I mean? Like we have contests where they're like, you're actually solving a thing that we might, I don't know, a climate change thing or something, right? But I mean, I guess there's these team shows that are, but I feel like it's part entertainment, but it's part like humans liking to get together to solve stuff.
I think that's really, I like how you described it as endearing, because I think that it's so easy to start criticizing aspects of human nature, but it's nice to, like, one of my ones that I had sort of a realization about was the way that, especially during COVID, a lot of people were referring to each other as sheep. This was a really common thing. Do you remember this? So people who were critical of COVID policy, it was very common to refer to everybody else as a bunch of sheep who were blindly following COVID policy. And I guess I've probably said this before, but I tend to think that the impulse to follow the herd is actually a positive impulse. It's not that impulse that is necessarily to be criticized, although there's room for obviously some criticism of it, but to mock it to that extent, the impulse comes from a positive place, and it's being exploited by people who are, taking advantage of people's positive nature that want to follow one another and want to believe in one another. Like you and Deborah were saying, Jennifer, earlier about wanting to believe institutions. Like that comes from a place of giving the benefit of the doubt and believing and wanting to believe in your fellow man. And so to mock that, I think it's something, again, there's room for nuance there, but it's not just ridiculous.
Well, we're so creatures. We want to get along. We need to be able to trust each other at a certain level, or else everything stops functioning. So it's normal to want belonging and community and connection.
As Koval 7 says, still sheep, sorry. Just fine. Because I see the point in that. I get that. But thank you for the direct. But I think that maybe the problem isn't the following people. Maybe the problem is following psychopathic institutions. And that kind of gets back to, like, do you guys remember, and I know we need to wrap up, but do you remember the documentary from like maybe the 90s called The Corporation? Y'all remember that? Oh, it was a good one. And it talked about how corporations are basically similar to psychopaths because they aren't able to have any care for individual well-being. they have to take care of themselves. And so there's something about the structure of that organization that just it's, I think, was it you, Jennifer, that said that after a while an organization or a group loses sight of its original mission and becomes about self-maintenance. And so at that point, when it becomes about self-maintenance, it's no longer dedicated to whatever it said it was doing in the first place. Maybe that's health, maybe that's pharmaceuticals, maybe that's childcare, whatever it is. And if we're still following along with that, we are the sheep, so to speak, that think we're following the herd, but we're actually being led astray.
Yeah.
I don't know, pretty interesting. But
Mhm.
as we wrap up, this has been very fun. I've enjoyed your hats and your thoughts, and
anyone who's listening in.
Yeah, Deborah, are you picking up any signal there?
Yes,
From the
there we go.
and Jennifer, from your like listening device?
Yeah, man, I'm hearing all kinds of crap.
David, don't you have another part of your hat? Where's the other part?
No.
I thought you had a topper.
Oh, I did actually. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I did have. There you
There we
go.
go.
Oh God. Yeah.
Oh, actually, that's now it starts looking World War I, like Bismarck or something. Like
It looks like an acorn now, doesn't it?
Looks like a conspiracy acorn. Paranoia acorn. Well, any final thoughts that any of y'all have that we should have talked about and missed, or want to put a fine point on anything?
No, let's do a live stream though, talking about monogamy and non-monogamy. That topic seems to keep popping up.
Yeah, I think
I'd
that's a
enjoy
great
that.
idea. Okay, good. Well, we'll plan on that. And thank you
Thanks,
everybody
guys.
who participated in the chat. It was great to have you all here.